item 11, which is Port's pending status update. I'll move that. If I've got a second to Councillor Clow, second that. Thank you. Any questions? I haven't received any yet. Right, I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item number 12 is Tenders and Procurement Forward Work Programme to October 2016.
Happy to move.
To move that, Councillor Quacks.
Happy to second.
Second, it's Councillor Fletcher, and we have any questions? Comments? Oh, Councillor Crum. Take a seat, sorry. Sarah, I think there is a question, so take a seat. Councillor Crum.
Actually, it might not be a question for Sarah, but just a question in regards to the formatting for forward work programs. So I understand that we're taking this across all committees.
All committees.
Similar formatting. We raised this at Tenders and Procurement Committee. There's no technical column for timeline. So as you'll see, because this went through TMP first, under decisions required, Sarah's helpfully put in what quarters we'll be looking at things, but just perhaps a note for across all committees. There's sort of a randomness around timing for all committees, and perhaps it warrants its own separate column. But while I'm at it, an extra comment. If anyone not on Tenders and Procurement would like to come to Tenders and Procurement at some point, you'd probably want to come for 4.1 when we're looking at supplier relationship management plans. So we're looking closer at our top 100 suppliers, and it's a really interesting body of work. So I know that Chairman Councillor Quacks would agree with me that it's a really good usage of your time. So we'll look forward to seeing you at committee sometime soon.
Thank you very much. So, and I see Claire nodding about the timing. Yep, the timeline. So yes, thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And have a good Christmas, please. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Moving on to item 13. Welcome, Claire.
Hello.
And Kevin. The
And
community update. Brand's coming.
Yep.
Who else?
So I'm just here briefly to introduce the item because this is part of our ongoing business improvement and performance reporting program of work that we've been presenting throughout the year. And the theme today are leases. Kevin and Bran and Rob will present to you on that. And I talked with you briefly this morning, Madam Chair. This is something that we instituted this year based on your requests last year, and the commitment is to continue this next year. And if there's any feedback on how the program has worked this year, we've covered things from CapEx through to technical advice to procurement. So if people have any feedback generally at the end after the presentation, please let me know.
Thank you. Right, Kevin.
Thank you, Claire. Morning, Chair, members. Thanks for this opportunity. As Claire says, we've just got a few slides that we'll talk through, just to provide an overview of the way in which we're working differently, and we're pleased to say much more effectively, around the community lease programme for 15-16. And I think you'll all be familiar with community leases. They're one of the community assistance tools that we've got available to support community organisations in Auckland to sustain activities and experiences that are increasingly aligned to our local board priorities. There are a number of leases, about 1,200 across the city, and 2015-16 is a big year in terms of our work programme, with a heck of a lot of work to get through. Mainly because we've got a number of leases that have expired and have rolled on beyond their initial expiry date. We've also got a number that are arising, and part of that is a function of the fact that we're now 5 years old, and legacy councils made quite a number of decisions in the last months of those legacy councils that envisaged a 5-year block. So we've got a lot of work that's naturally arising. We knew that at the start of this year, but also we got a lot of encouragement from our local board chairs when we met with them on the 24th of August this year, who fed back to us that actually there's a lot of groups out there with a lot of members who are passionate about their access to these leases. And there was some concern that they couldn't see that security of tenure that they really wanted to see to be able to push on confidently with their activities. So a little bit of context around why we've put the effort we have into this business improvement initiative. What this slide shows you, there's many factors involved in community leasing. Basically a continuum of making sure that we've got the right asset in the right place at the right time, that we've got a fair and easy way for our community organisations to express an interest and access the benefits of these facilities, that we've got good management and oversight arrangements in place to support the tenancy, and most importantly that we've got effective process in place to showcase the benefits that have been created and, if you like, close the loop in terms of the return on that investment. So many components to it, and many areas for improvement, quite frankly. There's a lot of potential still to be realised from this portfolio. But we needed to start somewhere, and we're quite pragmatic in choosing to start on these three areas highlighted here. And what we've been doing in the last 3 months is basically going back to the drawing board and reconceiving how we work around these three areas. So just in terms of the components you see there, in terms of new leases and existing community leases that need renewal, what we've really focused on is increasing productivity, getting much better control of our processes around these areas, so that we take away the uncertainty that some of those groups were recently experiencing. By doing that, we improve the overall currency of this portfolio. Many more of those leases are current and viable, and that allows us to shift our focus to more strategic considerations. What can we achieve with these brilliant assets that we have in partnerships with the many groups that make use of them? So those two areas have been key, as has that area of activity on reserve. So trying to make it clearer for everyone what activities can take place in which areas, and particularly upon which aspects of land, and looking to enable some of those policies around community empowerment, looking to really foster community enterprise by putting in place a much more enabling way of working, and that's the area that Bram and Rob will talk to a little further shortly. So lots of components there. The key thing as well, we didn't want to lose sight of the whole body of work, but there's some very clear areas to focus on. So first thing was to have a look at an analysis of this year's work programme. What you see there in total, 509 pieces of work to complete this year. That works out at about 40% of the portfolio. So this is probably our biggest facility portfolio, and 40% of it needs attention this year. So you can see why we've had to adopt a very different way of working to enable us to be effective. Just the numbers there, the start of this year, we had 50 decisions that had already been made but needed to be fully executed. We had 150 leases that require renewal, or at least consideration for renewal during this year. We had 229 land leases that had expired and need to be re-let this year, and 80 new leases in council-owned buildings similarly need to be re-let. And you'll see we've categorised that work in terms of complex and fast track, and the real focus has been to let's do the simple things first and take those pain points away. So a real focus on simplifying, streamlining, and getting through the body of that work shown there in blue. But at the same time, not losing sight of some of those more complex matters and acknowledging that actually they need time to work through. So we need to start on those things now, and that's exactly what we have been doing. And when we talk about complex, there's a few components to that. So we're talking about, I'll just use a couple of examples. We might be talking about things that are quite involved. So if I use the example of the showgrounds, AMP showgrounds down in Clevedon, what we've got there is sort of multi-stakeholder arrangement. So we've got leases within a lease. There's a lot of work to do to establish a harmonious environment there. If you think about some of the complexity, it relates to dependencies. So we're working at the moment, Hibiscus and Bays, around the Orewa life-saving club. The lease there is quite straightforward, but it's dependent on enabling the group to redevelop its club rooms and associated commercial cafe there. So we've got dependencies around the lease. We've also sometimes got health and performance issues. So groups aren't always doing brilliantly and going ahead. Sometimes they're in decline, sometimes they're going backwards. We have to work through those things with the groups. And as I mentioned before, we sometimes have classification issues. So we might have a fabulous group that's got fabulous activity, but it happens to be contrary to the underlying classification for that land. And so we need to...
You're talking about Omaha?
Not just Omaha, there's probably about 100 of those things that need to be worked through, and they do take time. So the focus for these last 3 months, as I say, the objective there was to, back to the drawing board, look at every component in terms of the way we were working, to simplify